Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Immortale Dei of Pope Leo XIII. We'll continue this study. We left off on page 17. Therefore God has divided the middle of page 17. God has divided the care of the human race between two powers. Of course, the what and the what powers?
Ecclesiastical and civil.
Yes. One indeed established for divine things. Which one is that?
Ecclesiastical.
And the other for human things, which is?
Civil.
Civil power, yes. Each is supreme for its own type. Each has certain ends by which it is contained and which are defined by their own nature and proximate cause. Whence a thing is contained as by a sphere, in which the actions of each is moved by its own proper law. But because the rule of each is towards or over the same subjects, same objects, that is, people, families, men, women, etc., since it can happen in practice that one and the same thing, though it is often otherwise, but nevertheless the same thing touches upon the law and judgments of both church and state. The most provident God, by whom both are established, must have composed the paths of both rightly and in order. And those that are ordained by God, says St. Paul, Romans 13:1. Because if it were not thus, the causes of deadly struggle and strife would often be borne, nor seldom would men be worried and anxious of mind when they do an act as if a man must cling onto a forked road, contrary to the two commanding powers, deciding which rule he cannot reject while keeping his duty. However, it is supremely repugnant to think that about the wisdom and goodness of God, who even in physical things, although they are of a far lower order, nevertheless united natural power and causes to one another with controlled reason and a certain marvelous harmony, so that none of them might hinder the others, and all might likewise be there for the world to see, united most fittingly and appropriately. So in other words, the church and state are not built by God to be at odds. They're built by God to work together, to help their subjects, all get to heaven. The state looks after the temporal things. The church looks more after the supernatural and spiritual things. But there should never be a conflict between them. You only have that with the revolution. The French Revolution, Protestant Revolution, and all the modern revolutions. And Vatican II crowning the revolution with the document on religious liberty, which is called what in Latin? Yes.
Dignitatis Humanis.
Louder.
Dignitatis Humanis.
Humane. Who wrote it?
Pope John Paul II.
No, he didn't. It was an American modernist priest. He was actually censored and condemned by Pius XII and forbidden to teach anymore in the United States. Father John Courtney Murray, S.J., Jesuit. So he justified what the popes always condemned in the document on religious liberty, praising it as the best system.
What's the document called again?
Dignitatis Humanae on religious liberty. And its basic argument is, look at the church in America. There was no Catholic state, but look how the church grew, look how it spread, and look how the church is growing in the 40s and 50s. So see, the best system of the world is when the state is neutral on matters of religion. That's the argument. And it's totally false. And Leo XIII condemned the error of Americanism. It's called Americanism, and it has several tentacles. And one of them is that all the world should have neutral states and governments on religion, because it's the best. And look at America, it's working the best. Well, Leo XIII corrected that and slapped Cardinal Gibbons on the hand and said, no, this is condemned by the church, and it would be better if the civil laws in the United States supported the Catholic Church. In other words, a Catholic state. But Gibbons, Cardinal Gibbons, along with most of the American clergy, were very liberal, and they said, well, Leo XIII, he's an old fuddy-duddy. He's trying to impose European ways on us. But no, it's the church's teaching, and it all hinges on what great dogma of the faith?
Christ the King.
Christ the King. That's right. That is our fight of tradition. That is the heart of the fight, is Christ the King. It's not the Latin Mass, as Bishop Fillet has shifted the focus from Christ the King and the integral Catholic faith. He's sideswiped that and focused it more on, it's all about the Mass, the Mass, the Mass, which is the same language as all these Ecclesia Dei groups. St. Peter, Christ the King, Campos Brazil. Okay. So yes, the church and state should be harmonious. Right? Pope Leo XIII, no, St. Thomas Aquinas will say, the church is to the state what in man the soul is to the body. If you separate the soul and the body, what have you got, Anthony?
Death.
Death. You separate church and state, what do you have?
Death.
Death of society, absolutely. And we're watching it. And it has a real obsession with death. This whole obsession with killing babies and inventing every single possible way to block babies. And because God makes such powerful, successful ways of having children, it's powerful because he wants children. So if that fails, if their modern technology fails, then they have backup with pills that will kill the baby in the mother's womb and just sweep it right out. And if that fails, they've got more deadly attempts to kill the baby. Abortion. And abortion pills now that Trump is so supportive of. It's horrendous. It's really sick. And it's got to mess up the minds of those girls. When they take these pills and they see hands and feet and heads and eyes falling out of them, I'm sure it puts many of them to the psych ward. I mean, how can you stomach that? You know, and they're guilty. They've killed their baby, and they see their baby. It's really sick. It's really perverse. How many of you have seen the film Unplanned? Unplanned. Yeah, it's about Abby Johnson. She did over 20,000 abortions. And in the movie, it shows, you know, a blonde girl with shorts and a T-shirt praying out front, outside of the gate, right? And some Catholics planting miraculous medals. But the real story was, it was a Catholic nun in full habit. She would go there to pray and plant miraculous medals around the abortion clinic. That's the real story. And Abby Johnson, you know, doing the devil's work, which she was at the time. She's converted now, but she has to come to tradition. But she, you know, being a servant of the devil, she had a sense of where the miraculous medals were buried in the dirt. She had just sensed it. And she'd go out and dig them up. But she didn't throw them away. She just cleaned them off and kept them in a jar. So over a number of months or years, she had a whole jar of miraculous medals. So Our Lady lives up to her promise. You know, miraculous medal is not called miraculous for nothing. So if one of the workers couldn't come in that day, so she had to assist at the actual abortion, which she never did. She was always in the office. But that's what woke her up, because she could see the clear, what do they call that? Ultrasound. Now the technology is so advanced, they see the baby's face, his nose, the body parts. They know if it's a boy or girl early, right? And when she saw what happened on the screen, she was sick. She couldn't contain herself. She had to leave. She had to go home early. And then there was a big hurricane coming in I think it was Texas or southeast U.S. where it was. So she arranged for all these scheduled abortions to come early and get them all done in one day or a few days. So in that crunch, she had blood splattered on her sneakers. And she came home and her little daughter said, "Mommy, why do you have blood on your shoes?" And that's where it started to sink in a little more. I mean, I don't know how any human being can kill babies and not think that they're actually killing babies. I don't know how that can happen.
It's a spiritual blindness.
A blindness and hardness of heart. It has to be a hardness of heart. Because everyone, I mean, you don't need to be told this is a baby in your mother's womb. Of course, they fill their heads with lies of evolution, that it's just a blob. But every mother knows, it's written in her heart. Even in Scripture it says, can a mother forget her child? And if she does, I, your God, will not forget you. So anyway, so she finally, Abby Johnson converts. She then becomes Catholic. And now she's doing everything to fight abortion. So God bless her and Mary help her and lead her to tradition. But it's really, abortion is one thing among many that just sickens you. It's just so horrifying. Horrifying. 4,000 abortions a day in the United States. That means today, a crowd of 4,000. That's, that would fill up a lot in a stadium, wouldn't it? And over a year, you have 20,000 babies. That's a whole stadia of babies being killed every year. I forget how many a year. It fluctuates. And now it's increasing because Trump has really pushed this pill. It's really sick. One nurse apparently said that when Catholics are out in front of the abortion clinic praying the rosary, they can't do the abortions. Everything goes wrong. The machine breaks down, or someone's late, or flat tire. Nothing works. So it's a good thing to pray the rosary in front of the abortion clinic. We've done it many times. But you got to dance with these stupid rules now and walk on the sidewalk in front. It's a public property, the sidewalk, so you can pray the rosary in front of it. And one time in Syracuse, I just walked in right into the abortion clinic, took a few of the boys in with me, and said, "Look, boys, this is where they kill all the babies. And see these nice secretaries here? They arranged a schedule to butcher the babies. Sir, who brought you in here? Who allowed you in here?" I said, "Well, it's public property. Can I walk in?" "Sir, you're causing a commotion." So they called the police, and the police came, and we had abortion prayer rosaries when I was in Philadelphia. And we had all the parish come and pray the rosary in front of one of the abortion clinics. And what happens often, the police are called, of course. But in this case, the police, there was a couple police. One was a big black guy. They were Catholic. So they just prayed with us. They prayed with us. They saw we were peaceful. We were just praying. And I had my Beretta, cope, stole. Altar boys had candles, crucifix. So I should show you the film. It's called The Hard Truth. It's like a 10-minute film on abortion. But I've shown it to young adults, and some of these big tough guys were in tears after it. So really, really sick. Abortion, the state should be protecting these unborn children by law. And praise to Oklahoma and a couple other states in the U.S. that ban abortion and will punish even the doctors who do it. Praise to Oklahoma and other states. But woe to states like Minnesota. That creep, what's his name? Walz. Governor Walz of Minnesota. He's a creep and a half. He was running with Harris, right? What was her name?
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. She's already forgotten, you see? But this Walz, he's passed abortion up to after birth. So if the baby is born and the mother doesn't want it, the nurses have to agree to let it die. The baby's kicking, crying, kicking his feet. Healthy, strong baby, and left to die. This is the United States of America, the land of the free, the glorious separation of church and state. This is what it means. Yes, that's exactly what it means. Butchering babies, killing the old, messing up the family, taking children out of the home in the name of child protection service. We're all messed up from these Masonic liberal principles. That's why priests are needed that will preach the real Catholic faith, the kingship of Christ. If the bishops and the priests of the 1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 1900s preached the kingship of Jesus Christ, America would be far better off. And there probably would have been martyrs. And bishops and priests of the United States never rallied for a Catholic state. But that is something we have to do, whether you're a priest or not. Our goal is a Catholic state. Oh, how oppressive, how narrow-minded, how Middle Ages. Well, too bad, because God is God, Christ is King, God did become man, He did establish His church. These are objective facts. And this is what the Pope is saying. The church and state can't be at odds, because it'll be like mom and dad fighting. It's not healthy. They must work together. So we're at the bottom of page 18. Pick it up, Tony. And thus,
a certain well-ordered connection must pass between each power, which indeed is not unjustly compared to the union through which the soul and the body are connected in man. But it should be of such a type and amount that it cannot otherwise be judged, except by looking back, as we have said, to the nature of both, and having the justification of the excellence and nobility of the causes, since to the one is given to care closely and carefully for the advantages of mortal things, to the other is given to prepare heavenly and eternal goods.
so which one cares over mortal affairs?
The civil power.
Which one the heavenly and eternal goods?
Ecclesiastical.
Go on.
Whatever, therefore, is sacred in any way in human things, whatever pertains to the salvation of souls or the worship of God, either because of its nature itself, or because it is understood on account of its cause to be referred to such, all such are in the power and judgment of the Church. For the rest, in truth, which the civil and political type embraces, is rightly subject to the civil authority, since Jesus Christ commanded that what is Caesar's be given to Caesar, and what is God's to God. But at sometimes it happens that, when the matter of some other agreement for peaceful liberty prevails, without doubt, those who are princes of republics and the Roman pontiff may agree about some specific matter for the same gain. In such times, the Church presents special proofs of maternal piety, since she is accustomed to summon so much ease and indulgence as greatly as she can.
Yeah, so the Catholic Church is is very gentle and very kind to people. She always is. And if the state, let's say, makes a decision and there's some friction, then the men of the church and the men of the state need to sit down and discuss and come up with a solution. And this solution is often called a what between church and state. That they agree on matters, certain matters.
An accord?
You're close. Concordat. It's called a concordat. So the famous concordat of Mussolini with Pope Pius XII. Mussolini is smeared, of course, as a bad fascist and all this stuff. And I'm not canonizing him, but he was very favorable to the Catholic Church. And they worked out a concordat, which was the church is free to work, and they won't persecute the church anymore. As under Victor Emmanuel, he was threatening even the life of Pius IX, who had to flee out of Rome for his life. He had to flee with an oversized coat, oversized glasses, oversized hat, a cassock and coat that didn't fit him. That's how he fled out of Rome, out of the Vatican. So Mussolini made a concordat that, okay, we're not going to persecute the church. You're free. And the church demanded, you must respect the church's rights. Right? So that's called a concordat. Yes.
Mussolini sent missionaries to Ethiopia too.
He sent Catholic missionaries to Ethiopia. I hope he saved his soul. He died a horrible death. They hanged him, I think, by his ankles and wrist. So, anyway. Yeah, usually in modern history, in my modern history I mean since the 1500s, and usually what the world and the Masonic history books and Masonic media, those who say are villains, they're usually good people. And those who they say are great people and heroes are usually criminals. And that's how you have to read modern day media. Those who they praise, they're often no good. Those they condemn are often not as bad as they're shown to be. So we have to not swallow the lies of the media. But most people do. Sheeple, right? All right. Go on, Anthony. In the next paragraph, page 20.
The Christian regulation of the civil society of men is of this sort, which we have briefly touched upon, not rashly nor with a feigned passion, but led from the greatest and truest principles, which themselves are confirmed by natural reason.
Okay, here you have the Pope coming back to the principles governing church and state. And it's not just some arbitrary wish of some Pope. He always comes down to, this is confirmed by what? Natural reason, natural law. You notice the popes always come back to that, which is a very important point. Because a lot of people say, oh, it's the Pope, if the Pope condemns this, it's evil because the Pope says so. No. It's evil because it's against the natural law and against the natural reason. Very important points. Right? So you see the good popes are always building on the natural law. And who built in the natural law? What is the natural law? Anybody? According to St. Thomas Aquinas? The natural law is built into every man. And the natural law is basically summed up in what?
The Ten Commandments.
Yes. I don't need to be told you can't kill your neighbor. I know that's wrong. Nobody needs to tell me that. But God had to say it explicitly because we can be so calloused and corrupt. So the natural law and natural reason, it has the sense of do good and avoid evil built into us. called man's conscience. Every man has a conscience. Do good and avoid evil. How do we know we have a conscience? Little Johnny stole cookies from the cookie jar during the day while Mom was out shopping. And she told him, no cookies, those are for dessert tonight. She sees crumbs around the cookie jar and about 5 cookies missing. And when she comes home, little Mary comes running, and the little kids come running, the older sisters come running. Hi, Mom. Hey, where's so-and-so? Oh, he or she is hiding in her room. Well, why is she hiding? So already, why is he hiding? Because he's done something wrong. Why do murderers run away from the site of the murder? They know they've done something wrong. They don't need to be told. It's built into us. And so St. Thomas Aquinas will go into these details in his Summa. But he will say this, that the natural law and reason is a participation in the divine, eternal law of God. It's built into us by God. And that answers the question why, how does someone outside the church, if they save their soul, it's not saving their soul outside the church, but if they save their soul, it's through the Catholic Church. And they obeyed the natural law. They were repentant of their sins. They didn't know. So God will judge them fairly, according to the natural law and the dictates of reason. So, if I was a pygmy, and I knew in my conscience I can't steal my neighbor's property, and I can't take my neighbor's wife, but I do it anyway, I know I'm doing wrong. And if I'm not sorry, I'm going to go to hell, right? Because I know better. We don't need to be told. But some societies can be very corrupt and make a practice of these things, like the Aztecs and the Indians in the United States, in Canada. They were lying, stealing, cheating, adultery. That was very common. And the priests had to teach them. All right, Michael, go on. But such a form of the republic
has nothing which should either be seen as less worthy than the greatness of princes, or lacking in splendor, and it is utterly absent that the laws of majesty should diminish. Rather, it makes them more stable and majestic. No, indeed, if it is considered more deeply, this form has a great perfection in which other modes of the republic are lacking, and the fruits which will follow from it are certainly many and excellent. If only each part holds its own place and honestly executes it, whatever duty and office is proposed to it. In fact, in that constitution of the republic which we spoke of before, there are indeed divine and human shares in a suitable order. The rights
of citizens
are unharmed, and the same of the divine, of natural, and of human things are defended by the protection of the laws. The description of each office, when wisely established, then have a protection fittingly ordained. Every man in this doubtful and laborious course to that eternal city knows that he has at ready leaders whom he may safely follow in entering, and helpers for reaching it. And they equally understand that some are given to them either to establish or to preserve security, luck, or other advantages on which this common life is based.
Okay. What's fortunas? Good fortune. They translated it as luck, but It really means ad securitatem, for security, ad fortunas, for good fortune, ad commoda cetera, or other advantages on which this common life is based. So this is saying, man, when the laws of the state help keep men on the path of virtue without overstepping their domain, the state can't, be at gunpoint making sure you get to Mass on Sunday. That would be an excessive overreach of the state. But the state can forbid, for example, Walmarts to be open on Sunday. But little mom and dad pops shops can be open in case people need some milk or bread. The state can make it difficult for businesses to be open on Sunday and discourage it. There used to be in the United States I think it was called the Blue Laws, where businesses had to be shut down on Sunday. It used to be. There used to be a time when evolution was not allowed to be taught in schools. And then there was a huge court case in the South, a famous court case, I forgot the name of it, where they agreed to start teaching evolution in the schools. A lie.
And that kind of goes to what you were saying about things that we read in modern history are usually lies. Same thing with science textbooks, because it used to say in them the theory of evolution, presented it as a theory. Now they remove the theory, and now they just teach it as evolution as if it's a fact. And if you question it as a student, you're radical or you're crazy.
Yeah.
But it's a theory.
Yeah.
They don't teach it like that. They teach it as if it's a known fact, and everybody just knows that evolution is true. That's how they teach it, instead of saying.
Yeah. That's wicked, very wicked. But what does that do to the mind of the children? That's why there's so many suicides among the young. If there's no God, then what? Nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. Life becomes horribly dark without God. Horribly dark. And youngsters are committing suicide at a very high rate. Young people, all across the world now. That was unheard of in the Middle Ages. Just unheard of.
Aren't suicides the leading cause of death for teenagers? One of them?
I don't know. Let's take a look. It's leading cause of death.
I think heart disease is the one generally.
Yeah, you know what that's from. Yes. Let's just take a quick look here. The leading cause of death in teenagers in the United States is accidents, specifically motor vehicle crashes. Other significant causes include homicide, suicide is right up there, cancer, heart disease, and cancer from the shots, of course, injuries from falls, fires, and poisonings. So suicide is right up there. How horrible. And it's a crime of these schools. We have separation of church and state. We can't have God taught in schools, nor prayer. And these poor kids are just lost. So lost. So lost. So messed up. And then you add on that broken homes, mom and dad divorced, or mom and dad fighting. These poor children, do they even have a chance? Do they even have a chance? Of course, they can pray. God will help them and lead them. Yeah, so sad. I was on the bus once with a kid that sat next to me, a teenage boy, 16, 17. His pants were all patches sewed together by dental floss. He was very proud of that. But we got talking, and he was running. He didn't want to be at home anymore because his parents were divorced. But he was close to his grandma, and she prayed the rosary. she prayed the rosary. So that was an anchor for him. His last name was Gottlob, so he was a kind of a German kid, American German boy. So I always pray for him, but poor little soul. So I gave him a rosary, some medals, and encouraged him to keep praying to Our Lady. You know, your mother may not want you at home, but your heavenly mother does. So, yeah, poor souls. Poor souls. And that's why a lot of these men of the state will be in hell, especially in the United States, the West world. A lot of these politicians will be in hell. There was, where was it? In Pennsylvania, I think. I wrote it down. But there was a famous pro-abortion. Let me see if I have it in here. Anyway, there was a famous pro-abortion politician, and boasting about it, that he was able to kill many, many babies and save the world from overpopulation. And he ended up in a plane crash, crashing right next to a children's playground at a public school. And he was killed. And there was another woman who boasted about having many abortions. She was promoting abortions heavily. She was a famous actress. I don't remember the name, and she died in a car crash, punctured by the steering wheel, by the shifting, what do you call that? The shifting bar, shifting stick, and then the other car with glass and metal pieces. She died punctured to death. The way she treated her own babies, that's how she died. Ripped apart and punctured to death. She was a famous actress of the 70s or 80s or 60s. I wrote it down, but anyway, can't find it. But here's a quote on the tattoos, Leviticus 19:28. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, neither shall you make in yourselves any figures or marks. I am the Lord. There it is, explicitly forbidding tattoos. Of course, well, Father, I don't like tattoos either, but I got one of the Sacred Heart. And I got the crown of thorns on my biceps with the heart of Jesus. Yeah, well, okay, well, still doesn't justify it, but all right. Where were we?
Back. Bottom page.
Okay, pick it up, Michael. All right, we'll stop there. And oggi troviamo il nostro nome, Tomini.
Questa c'è la metà.